breaking news. In the story that's gripped and bewildered much of the nation, the horrifying abduction and desperate search for Nancy Guthrie.
4 months, the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie has remained one of the most unsettling mysteries in the country. Investigators believed they had reached a dead end, until now. Because authorities have just revealed a new development in the case, one that could completely change the direction of the investigation.
We believe we know why he did this, and we believe that it was targeted.
Evidence discovered near Guthrie's home is now being analyzed, and investigators say it may finally lead them to the person responsible. Tonight, we're breaking down the latest updates in the case, and what investigators now believe may have happened. If you're new here and you follow true crime investigations as they unfold, subscribe to the channel. We break down the latest developments in some of the most disturbing and mysterious cases. The night Nancy Guthrie disappeared began like any other quiet evening in her Tucson neighborhood. The streets were calm, the houses dark, and the routines of the people living there had already settled into the stillness of the night. Inside her home, nothing seemed unusual. Investigators later confirmed that there were no immediate signs of distress earlier in the evening. No reports of disturbances. No calls for help. No indication that anything out of the ordinary had taken place. Nancy Guthrie had been inside her home, going about what appeared to be the normal rhythm of her life. For the people around her, there was no reason to believe anything was wrong. But by the following morning, something had clearly changed. When attempts were made to contact her, there was no response. Calls went unanswered. Messages received no reply. As the hours passed, concern began to grow among those who knew her. Eventually, someone went to check on the house. What they found immediately raised alarm. Nancy Guthrie was gone. At first, the situation appeared confusing rather than suspicious. People sometimes leave their homes unexpectedly. There are moments when routines change or plans shift without warning. But as investigators began to take a closer look, the circumstances surrounding her disappearance quickly began to stand out. Inside the home, certain details suggested that Nancy had not simply walked away. Her belongings remained where they normally would have been. Personal items that someone would typically take when leaving for any extended period of time had been left behind. To investigators, this was the first indication that something was wrong. As officers continued examining the property, they moved toward the entrance of the home. It was there that they noticed something that immediately shifted the tone of the investigation. Near the area where Nancy would have entered or exited the house, investigators discovered signs that suggested the situation may not have been voluntary. The exact details of what was found have not been fully disclosed publicly, but officials confirmed that the discovery was serious enough to change how they approached the case. What had initially been treated as a missing person report was now being considered something far more troubling. Detectives began asking a different set of questions. Had someone come to the home that night? Had Nancy encountered someone outside? Or had someone been watching the house, waiting for the moment when she would be alone? As investigators expanded their search of the surrounding area, officers began canvassing the neighborhood. They spoke with neighbors, asking if anyone had seen unusual activity during the night. In cases like this, the smallest observation can become critical. A car parked where it shouldn't have been. A person walking down a street at an unusual hour. A sound that might not have seemed important at the time. Every detail suddenly mattered. Residents in the neighborhood tried to recall anything that might help investigators piece together the events of the night. But at first there were few clear answers. What detectives did know was that Nancy Guthrie had been inside her home the night before. And by the following morning she was gone. That realization forced investigators to confront a difficult possibility. Whatever happened to Nancy Guthrie likely occurred during the quiet hours of the night, when the neighborhood was asleep and the streets were empty. Somewhere between those late evening hours and the moment people began noticing her absence, something had taken place that removed her from the home. And as the investigation continued, detectives began to realize that the truth about what happened that night might be hidden not inside the house itself, but somewhere just beyond its doors. Investigators began their search around the front entrance of Nancy Guthrie's home. The area was quiet, but detectives quickly noticed something that didn't appear consistent with a normal departure. Near the entrance of the property, officers located evidence that immediately changed the direction of the investigation. What investigators discovered suggested that Nancy Guthrie may not have left the home voluntarily. At that moment, the case stopped being treated as a simple missing person report. Detectives were now investigating the possibility that Nancy Guthrie had been taken against her will. But the most disturbing detail investigators uncovered came from a nearby surveillance camera. In neighborhoods across the country, doorbell cameras and security systems quietly record the routines of daily life. Most of the time the footage is never reviewed. But in cases like this, those cameras can capture moments no one realizes are important. Until later. Detectives began canvassing the surrounding homes, asking residents if any of their cameras might have recorded activity during the night Nancy Guthrie disappeared. Several homeowners agreed to provide their footage. Investigators began reviewing hours of video. Most of it showed exactly what you would expect from a quiet neighborhood in the middle of the night. Empty streets.
Again, 12 cars passed by. It's not clear if they are looking at any cars that may have gone by more than once or twice. We'll see. This home is about 2 miles away from Nancy's home. The FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Office are aware of this and are investigating. Also, this morning, we're hearing Savannah Guthrie plans to return to New York soon and resume.
Still driveways. Occasionally a passing vehicle. But then, in footage captured from a nearby camera, investigators noticed something unusual. A figure appeared moving through the area during the same time investigators believe Nancy Guthrie vanished. The person was dressed in dark clothing and appeared to be moving cautiously through the neighborhood. What immediately stood out to detectives was the timing. The footage had been recorded during the early hours of the morning, when the streets were nearly empty and most residents were asleep. The individual appeared to approach the area near Nancy Guthrie's home. Investigators studied the footage carefully, looking for anything that could help identify the person. But the figure's face was not clearly visible. The individual appeared to be wearing clothing that concealed key identifying features. To detectives, the footage raised several critical questions. Was this person simply someone passing through the neighborhood? Or was this individual connected to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance? Investigators continued analyzing the video, reviewing every frame in an effort to understand what had happened that night. The footage did not show what happened inside the home. But it suggested that someone had been present in the area during the exact window of time when Nancy Guthrie disappeared. And for investigators, that was enough to shift the investigation once again. Because if the person captured on camera was connected to the case, then someone had been near the house during the critical hours of the night. And that meant the quiet neighborhood where Nancy Guthrie lived may have witnessed something far more serious than anyone initially realized. Investigators continued analyzing the surveillance footage captured around the neighborhood, hoping it would provide a clearer understanding of what had taken place during the night Nancy Guthrie disappeared. The figure seen moving through the area raised immediate concern, but investigators knew that video alone would not be enough to explain what had happened. They needed evidence that could connect the movements on camera to the events outside Nancy Guthrie's home. As the investigation progressed, officers returned to the property to take a closer look at the physical evidence discovered during the initial search. Items recovered from the area near the home were carefully collected and sent for further analysis. Forensic specialists began examining the materials, looking for anything that could reveal who may have been present that night. In cases like this, even the smallest detail can become the key to understanding what happened. Investigators also began comparing the timeline of the evidence with the movements captured on surveillance cameras throughout the neighborhood. They wanted to determine whether the person seen on camera had been near the house during the critical window of time when Nancy Guthrie disappeared. Officials have not released the full details of what the forensic analysis has uncovered, but authorities confirmed that new evidence recovered during the investigation is now being closely examined. According to investigators, this new development could provide the lead they have been waiting for. Detectives believe the evidence may help them narrow down who was in the area that night and whether the individual captured on camera was directly connected to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. For investigators, the goal now is to reconstruct the events of that night as precisely as possible. They are working to determine where the individual seen on camera came from, how long they remained in the area, and where they may have gone afterward. Each new piece of evidence brings investigators closer to understanding what happened during those quiet early morning hours. But even with these developments, one question continues to remain unanswered. What exactly happened to Nancy Guthrie on the night she disappeared? As the investigation continued, detectives began widening their search beyond the immediate area surrounding Nancy Guthrie's home. Officers canvassed the neighborhood once again, speaking with residents and asking if anyone had seen or heard anything unusual during the night Nancy disappeared. Even the smallest detail could become important, and detectives were determined to gather every possible piece of information that might help explain what had happened. At the same time, investigators continued reviewing surveillance footage collected from homes and businesses throughout the surrounding area. Each camera provided another perspective of the neighborhood during the hours investigators believed Nancy Guthrie vanished. Authorities also began examining possible routes someone could have used to leave the area quickly after the incident. By analyzing the movement of vehicles and individuals captured on nearby cameras, detectives hoped to determine whether anyone had entered or exited the neighborhood during the critical timeframe. Meanwhile, law enforcement officials assured the public that the case remained an active investigation. Investigators emphasized that they were continuing to follow multiple leads and analyze the evidence collected so far. Search efforts also expanded beyond the immediate neighborhood, as authorities worked to rule out any locations where Nancy Guthrie might have been taken. For the community, the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie had become deeply unsettling. Neighbors who once felt safe in the quiet neighborhood were now left wondering what had happened during the night Nancy vanished. And while investigators continued working to uncover the truth, one fact remained clear. Nancy Guthrie was still missing. And somewhere the answers to what happened that night were waiting to be discovered. The investigation into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance remains active, and detectives continue working to uncover what truly happened during the quiet hours of that night. Investigators are still reviewing evidence, analyzing surveillance footage, and following every possible lead that could explain how she vanished. Authorities believe that somewhere within the details already collected lies the key to understanding the events that unfolded outside her home. Law enforcement officials have urged anyone who may have seen something unusual during the night Nancy disappeared to come forward. Even the smallest piece of information could help investigators move closer to the truth. For now, the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie continues to leave unanswered questions for both investigators and the community. Somewhere within the events of that night is an explanation for what happened. And until that truth is discovered, the search for answers will continue.